I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Myanmar to introduce a statement by the Minister.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to introduce the recorded statement by His Excellency Kyaw Tint Swe, Union Minister for the Ministry of the Office of the State Counsellor of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. I thank you.
Mr. President, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, as we speak today, the entire world is waging war against our common enemy, the COVID-19 global pandemic. This pandemic has forced all of us to reassess our way of life as individuals and as communities, and to reconsider our standard modes of operation. This 75th General Assembly has been held virtually. It is indeed humbling that an invisible virus has taken nearly 1 million lives, disrupted economies, livelihoods, and torn asunder the social fabric of peoples all over the world. The global pandemic also lends itself as a test of the state of multilateralism. To overcome this pandemic in an unprecedented scale of global cooperation is required. Therefore, it is only apt that this year's theme is "The Future We Want, the United Nations We Need," reaffirming our collective commitment to multilateralism, confronting COVID-19 through effective multilateral action. It is now more than ever that we need to strengthen rules-based multilateralism to collectively overcome the exceptional challenges we face and to mitigate their impact on weaker nations and vulnerable peoples. Failure to do so would impact the social stability of countries and place additional burden on the UN. The UN represents our joint effort to improve the situation of hundreds of millions of human beings around the world. This said, we need to work together to develop the United Nations into an organization that we all want. It must be an organization that nations can turn to in times of need. It must remain a true beacon of hope for developing countries. In the area of human rights promotion and protection, the UN should ensure that its mandate holders adhere strictly to the principle of independence, impartiality, and integrity in the exercise of the duties. It must avoid double standards scrupulously, in particular towards member states that have to bear burdensome legacies very often as a result of a colonial past. Mr. President, COVID-19 global pandemic represents a formidable task for a developing country like Myanmar. We have taken a whole-of-nation approach in mobilizing the strength of our people through volunteerism and sharing spirit in the fight against the pandemic. These measures proved successful in coping with the first wave of the virus. But at present, we are facing the challenge of a second wave. The government has been making parallel efforts, both in protecting public health and mitigating the economic impact by implementing its COVID-19 Economic Recovery Plan, CERP. Pursuing the principle of leaving no one behind, Myanmar's response to the pandemic covers all vulnerable segments, especially IDPs, persons with disabilities, and low-income workers. To that end, the government adopted an action plan for the control of COVID-19 at IDP camps. To date, there have been no serious outbreaks in any camp. Mr. President, the peaceful transfer of state responsibilities to the first elected civilian government. This has ended over 5 decades of absolute military rule, but it is only the beginning of our people's long journey towards a fully democratic Myanmar. In just over a month from now, the people of Myanmar will go to the polls again. We have successfully put in place a political system that relies on ballots instead of bullets. Over the past 4 years, our government has made all-out effort within the space permitted by the 2008 Constitution to fulfill our people's dream of their inherent right to live in peace and security, with fundamental freedoms and assured fruits of development. It is only when the existing 2008 Constitution can be revised that we will be able to ensure the full democratic rights of our people. Mr. President, it is the aim of the NLD government to hold political negotiations with all ethnic nationalities that we might bring the 7-decade history of internal strife to a conclusion and achieve durable peace. To that end, the government successfully convened 4 sessions of the Union Peace Conference, the 21st Century Pinlon. As a result, the third part of the Union Accord, which includes basic guiding federal principles for the future of the Union, has been signed by the participating delegations. These principles will define the path that will be followed, regardless of which government might be at the helm, towards the building of a democratic federal union. Mr. President, when the NLD civilian government took office in March 2016, it identified key priorities to be addressed. These include the complex situation of Rakhine State. Despite the multiple challenges, the government is committed to lay down a sustainable foundation for peace, stability, and development for all persons in Rakhine State. Mr. President, the government shares the concern of the international community over the situation in Rakhine, in particular, the suffering of all communities affected by armed conflict. To resolve the issue, our government focused on the following area: humanitarian situation, repatriation, resettlement, reconciliation, and development. Allow me to focus on bilateral repatriation process. Our commitment to receive verified returnees in a voluntary, safe, and dignified manner under the bilateral agreement reached with Bangladesh in November 2017 remains steadfast. We invite the government of Bangladesh to show its genuine political will to cooperate by strictly adhering to the terms of the signed agreement. Bilateral cooperation is the only way that can effectively resolve the repatriation issue between Myanmar and Bangladesh. May I say this? Should Bangladesh commit itself to bilateral process, it will find Myanmar a willing partner. Pressure tactics will be futile. Myanmar does not react well to pressure. Myanmar's policy is to maintain friendly relations with all its 5 neighbours. We want to be good neighbours with Bangladesh, bound in a zero-tolerance policy towards terrorism, not merely in words, but in deeds. By so doing, we will be upholding the national interests, not just of our 2 countries, but the region as a whole. Both the terrorist group ARSA and the terrorist insurgent group AA have used Bangladeshi territory as a sanctuary. Efforts to prevent ARSA and its supporters in the camps of Cox's Bazar from hampering the bilateral repatriation process must be enhanced, as such activities pose a risk to both Bangladesh and Myanmar. Although bilateral repatriation has not yet started, more than 350 displaced persons from Cox's Bazar camp have returned to Rakhine State on their own volition through unofficial channels. Mr. President, We share the concern of the international community over the allegation of human rights violation in Rakhine State and take them seriously. During the public hearing before the International Court of Justice in December 2019, the State Counsellor Aung San Suu Kyi reaffirmed that if war crimes or human rights violations have been committed, they will be investigated and prosecuted by Myanmar's criminal justice system. This is our right, our obligation, and our commitment, and it is important for vital domestic processes linked to constitutional reform and peace in Myanmar. Based on the findings of the Independent Commission of Inquiry, ICOE, both the Union Attorney General and the Judge Advocate General are conducting ongoing investigations of allegations of crimes in Rakhine. On 15 September 2020, the Judge Advocate General also announced that an investigation of possible wider patterns of violations in the region of northern Rakhine in 2016 and 2017 has started. This represents highly significant progress in the domestic accountability process. A country should be given time, space, and respect for its domestic accountability processes. Independent experts have pointed out to the risks of demonization and one-sidedness in the way that some international actors swiftly reject any step Myanmar takes towards domestic accountability. As a State Counsellor observed before the ICJ last December, and I quote, "Feeding the flames of an extreme polarization in the context of Rakhine can harm the values of peace and harmony in Myanmar. Aggravating the wounds of conflict can undermine unity in Rakhine. Hate narratives are not simply confined to hate speech. Language that contributes to extreme polarization also amounts to hate narratives." End of quote. Mr. President, in April this year, the Presidential Office issued a directive to government officials to act in compliance of its treaty obligations under the Genocide Convention. Another directive was issued to all government officials to denounce and prevent all forms of hate speech and to participate in and support anti-hate speech activities. Anti-hate speech awareness campaigns and social cohesion programs are being implemented nationwide. The Election Commission and the Ministry of Information are working together with UNDP and UNESCO in an anti-hate speech program. Mr. President, in our democratic journey, we have achieved much progress, but it is far from over. Our progress is due to the resilience of our people and their strong will to build prosperity and well-being for all in Myanmar. We are nurturing and building a new nation together. We would like to thank our friends far and near who have offered their understanding and support during difficult times. We sincerely value the friendship. This brings to my conclusion. In May 2019, the UN released Strategy and Plan of Action Against Hate Speech. This must be lauded, as there is a dire need to address hate speech domestically. But we should also be aware of the international dimension, as referred to earlier. Demonizing fellow member states of the United Nations by using inadequately quality control information foster ill feeling between countries and people, which is the harbinger of hatred and conflict. This would weaken the principal objective of peace on which the UN Charter is based. We ask only for fair treatment from the international community. It is our appeal to member states to examine the negative narratives on Myanmar carefully and impartially before drawing their independent conclusion. We would appreciate it if the international community continues to extend its support and understanding to our efforts towards the achievement of sustainable peace, national reconciliation, genuine democracy, and inclusive development for all peoples in Myanmar. In the interest of time, I've read only part of my statement. The entire statement should be considered read. I thank you, Mr. President.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Union Minister for the Office of the State Counsellor of Myanmar for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the representative of the Maldives to introduce the Minister's statement.